Chapter 7, Rakeberhoth, Defensive Warfare. 6 hours until enemy fleet infiltration ETA. All ships, lift off. The order from the Defensive Fleet Command Center could only signify that the decisive battle was fast approaching. Detach the link pipe, Lafier ordered. Detaching the link pipe, said Samson, working his controls. And so the link pipes connecting the ships of Assault Unit 1 were tossed away. Igniting main engines. The assault ship Bosroar began to stir. Lifting off. Lafier moved her hand equipped with the control gauntlet slightly, and the ship advanced at a modest pace. They were not yet in position. The portal had almost no gravitational pull, so even though they'd surrounded the Aptic portal, they needed to maintain balance against Aptic 3's gravity and centrifugal force. Since they had to keep the engines revved in order to be at their assigned spot relative to the Aptic portal, going too fast would be a waste of propellant. For the time being, the Bosroar locked into the same orbit as the Aptic portal and stopped accelerating. All hands released from their shifts, said Lafier. Each individual is to rest or eat in accordance with the shift diagram. The star pilots saluted and left. Staying on duty on the bridge was an obligation laid only on flight branch star pilots. They were the ones who had to pilot the ships during an emergency, whereas star pilots of the other branches had no role and couldn't help. Lafier's lonely shift would last for an hour and a half. After a 3 hours break, they would return to all hands on duty in anticipation of combat. Yet Jint remained alongside her. "Captain, would you like a beverage?" he asked stiffly. "Sure, I'll take something to drink," she nodded. "If you want to be alone, just say the word. I don't want to cramp your style. Stay if you wish to stay. I'm not bothered either way." She was a tad heartened by the prospect, but she had successfully refrained from seeming so. Or so she intended. Lafier didn't need to specify her order. Jint knew to get her peach juice with lemon on top. He got himself his cold coffee while he was at it. "Could you pull up video of the outside?" "Sure." Lafier did so. Star Force's ships hovered in all directions, in front, in back, up, down, and to each side. There were so many that it was difficult to make out the phosphorescent glow of the Aptic portal lying in front. "I could never have guessed I'd ever see such a spectacle with my own eyes. When I was a kid," he said, deeply moved. "I knew I would. I was obligated from birth to enter the Star Forces. I knew I'd have to set foot on a battlefield at some point. I didn't think I'd have to do so as an assault ship captain, however. I wanted to enter the fray wearing the twin-wing circlet of a Commodore. You've got your whole future ahead of you. I'm sure that chance will come in time." "You know," realized Lafier, "I've never asked you what you wanted to do when you were younger." Jint could only shrug. "I was 10 years old by the standard calendar when the Empire showed up. So, probably too young to have spared any thought to a clear plan for the future. All I know for sure is that I never even dreamed I'd be going to space." "Interesting. You had many options available to you then." "Kind of, yeah. Though actually, that planet wasn't really bursting with opportunity." "Oh, I just remembered. I think I wanted to become a mine supervisor, since I heard tell of my mother having worked as one before she died. Not that I knew what that job entailed, mind you." "What kind of occupation is it?" "Haven't a clue, honestly, even now. But it's not like I can be a mine supervisor anymore, so even if I did know, it'd do nobody any good." "What's it like?" she asked, "not knowing what you'll be when you grow up?" "Anxiety-inducing, I guess," said Jint. "You could get stuck with a boring job to pay the bills, or you could discover that your dream job is just as boring. To tell you the truth, I hadn't given it that much thought when I was 10. I do remember feeling relieved when it was decided that I'd be an imperial noble. I hadn't blazed that path myself, but it was a path to follow nonetheless. Then I'm glad. No matter whether the path laid out for me led to worthwhile work or boring drudgery, at least I have no choice but to aim to be Empress." "I figured you might want to be Your Majesty." "I don't particularly want to be Empress. In fact, I'd rather ride on a mercantile ship. But I must at least try to aim for the Jade Throne. It's the duty of all those born to the clan occupation. Besides, I can always indulge in trade after abdicating." "The clan occupation, huh? Sometimes, your people's way of life sounds awfully simple." "You're an Ov, too, Jint." She wasn't sure if he was praising or denigrating their way of life by calling it simple, so she stopped at pointing that out. Yeah, Leifir, I know. He changed the subject. If this strategy succeeds, then the countdown of Hyde getting reconquered by the Empire won't be too far off. What will you do once you recover your star fief? What will I do? Jant looked at a loss. To tell the truth, it would be tough meeting with the people back home. I'd rather have somebody stand in for me if at all possible. To be the count for me. You should hire a magistrate. I should, but then it feels like I'm just running away. Even though I don't even have a reason. You have a great reason if you're working in the military. Oh yeah, I guess since I've still got 10 years of military service left, I can't be called the real and true count of the system, he said. Then his eyes virtually sparkled. A wonderful idea had occurred to him. Why don't we trade fiefs? You become the Countess of Hyde, and I can plant roses as the Viscount of Parian. The notion came as a shock to her. There's no way that would be an option. So it's a no-go, he said, without a trace of actual disappointment. And I thought it was such a good idea, too. Though I'll grant you, the title of Viscount of the Land of Roses doesn't exactly fit me to a T, either. You'd best resign yourself. A noble rank comes with duties. If I ever meet a taker, I'd give them my noble rank free of charge. The countship belongs to your family house. You can't just give it to someone. Good grief. So it's attached to the noble house of Lin, you say? The family house that currently consists of me. If only I had some cousin to foist it on. You can either stay in the Star Forces or ride a trade ship. If you don't like the idea of withdrawing to your fief, you'd be far from the only grandee doing likewise. That so? Then I might as well do that. His expression turned sunny enough, but only for a fleeting moment before it took a turn for the stiff. But then the folks back home will mock me as a coward. Every choice has its upsides and downsides. It is you who must decide, Leifir fired back. Thanks for the thought-provoking remarks. I'd been under the impression that becoming an of noble meant your life became set in stone, but it seems rather enjoyable, all things considered. Nobles need to enjoy themselves from time to time, too. Leifir clasped her hands behind her head. We Ovs haven't truly matured until we've experienced 3 separate periods in life. You and I both have just begun to step into the first. And there's no point in worrying our heads over the next. I'm not really worrying my head over it. But something had him so taken aback he was knitting his brow. That aside, what's this about 3 life periods? I can guess the first 2. The first is as a star pilot and the other is as a trader. But what's the third? You don't know. Though he wasn't as bad now as he had been 3 years ago, his ignorance still startled her at times. No, I don't. It's the most important of them all. Would you tell me already? It's your life as a parent. The first to assume their positions were the unliving, unfeeling mobile space-time mines. The battle line ships had crept close to the Aptic portal, and all at once unleashed the many mines they had stockpiled. The mines, thus fired, reached their assigned positions via inertia, and then stayed in place by briefly engaging the reverse thrusters. For a momentary span, they fell asleep. With the weak and light attitude control propulsor flames they intermittently spouted akin to soft snoring. The battle line ships, now significantly lighter, subsequently retreated, after which the assault ships came flocking, their antiproton cannons pointed squarely at the Aptic portal. The defense ships wedged their hedgehog-like frames in between the assault ships and wriggled the mobile laser cannons equipped onto their surfaces. Lastly, the patrol ships slowly and gently assumed their places. Battle preparations complete. 30 minutes until enemy fleet infiltration ETA. After hearing the report from his staff, the commander-in-chief of the Aptic Defensive Fleet, Nelith, looked down at the planar space map. Naturally, he couldn't see through to planar space from here in 3 space. That said, countless carrycrafts entered and emerged from the Aptic portal, sending fresh new information all the while. The enemy had largely divided their forces into diamond-shaped formations, and they were making a beeline for the Aptic portal. Meanwhile, at the Sod Darmap portal, much farther out than the enemy, their allied, principal fleet could be seen. It appears as though we ought to make them hold out for 5 hours, said Nelith, optimistic. But the enemy knows that, whispered Nife close by. They'll come at us so ferociously they'll be all but breathing fire. Well, if they didn't, what fun would it be? We're not waging war for your kicks, Nifei chided. Yes, but if I end up having some fun, then who can blame me? Are you sure no one would blame you? The chief of staff gave his genetically identical brother a skeptical look. Of course not. I'd never skew the battle for my own amusement, not with the lives of my subordinates on the line. In case that's what's got you so perturbed. Yes, that's what I'm worried about, obviously. I hope you don't forget what you just said. Not just for our subordinates' lives, but also not to lower the reputation of our clan any further. After a moment's thought, Nifei corrected himself. Or maybe I should say, in order not to raise it any further. Don't fret. I have nothing to do with the florid insanity of the Biboth clan. Whenever I think about how I'll be continuing my life of utter banality, I grin from ear to ear. Commanding a fleet while holding the title of Commodore is a life of utter banality, Nifei scoffed. That misconceived perception could be taken as a sign of our clan's chronic affliction, and we can't have that. Then take care not to make me any more anxious, said Nelith, peering at his brother's face. My urge to add yet another anecdote to the history of the madness of the Biboths has grown by the minute. It's okay. I'll be here for you. That is to say, I'll be here to stab you so as to stop that from happening. A transmission from the Carrycraft Cosserer interrupted the communications staff officer. The enemy has dispersed space-time bubbles thought to be mines. Tisk. So they've seized the first move while we're here flapping our gums, said Nelith. Incorporating the new intelligence, countless blips of light appeared in front of the enemy fleet on the planar space map. What's their ETA? 7 minutes. Shall we launch our own volley to intercept? Asked Nifei. We have no other choice. Otherwise, we'd just be sitting here getting blown to bits, and that'd really ruin my mood. That is a wise stance on the matter, Nelith. Thanks. He looked at the communications officer. We're shooting all of our mines at the portal. Notify the fleet. Lafier grasped the situation through her frocross, though they also had the video of the outside pulled up, too. Vision boasted advantages that were different from those of spatiosensory perception, and chief among them was color. In front of them, the mines were huddled shoulder to shoulder. And then, that herd of bombs heated up, their propulsor flames had spouted. And so it begins, she heard Samson mutter. Lafier's eyes darted to the war situation bulletin. It seemed there was still some time before the enemy fleet itself stormed through. The mines plunged one after the other into the portal. Though moments earlier, the mines had made such a dense blanket that the optic portal was almost entirely concealed. Once they were all gone, it left Lafier with the sense that they'd been rendered defenseless. But we were always defenseless to begin with. She bottled up her emotions. It mattered not whether there were mines out in front of them. It didn't change the fact that an assault ship's armor was thin. And they had no way of knowing what was happening over on the planar space side, either. They could only speculate. There was no doubt that their mines and the enemies were violently smashing into each other. And it was impossible that they'd destroy every one of the enemy's mines. A portion would certainly make their way out of the portal. Time stretched languidly as they waited. Her eyes fell on her control gauntlet-equipped left hand. 20 people's lives were hanging on her fingertips. Pre-battle nerves enveloped her. The sensation wasn't unpleasant, per se, but if it grew in excess, then it could well lead to her demise. Surreptitiously, so the star pilots on the bridge wouldn't notice, she took a deep breath to steel herself. The ETA of the enemy's vanguard wave of mines is at hand, said Sabash. That very instant, the optic portal began seething, with mines bubbling up from its surface. It was like a sickening cancer, with cells dividing from the portal and wildly multiplying in number. Commence battle. But Lafier's words of command might have been directed more toward herself. A mine charged at them from dead ahead. Lafier made to line it up with the antiproton cannon sights and pull the trigger, but that second, the mine broke apart before her eyes. She thought a consort ship had perhaps taken care of it, but it soon became clear that that wasn't the case. The mine's shards were accelerating. This could only be a multi-warhead type mine. Moreover, each of its warheads had propelling force behind it. Lafier gritted her teeth and pulled the trigger. One of the warheads was extinguished. The consort ships, for their parts, were also carrying out their task. And so each of the warheads were blown into actual shards this time. This shrapnel, too, posed a threat to assault ships, since they were so small and thinly armored. And since their relative velocity was so high, if they collided with one or more fragments, it could cause fatal damage. Lafier swerved to evade one such shard which was on the larger side, and which just so happened to be on a trajectory to cross paths with them. That slight loss of time efficiency was all it took for another warhead to sneak toward them. When she noticed, it was directly abeam the ship. She had no time to point the bow toward it. "Ekryua," she shouted, warning the deputy star pilot, who was manning the multi-turret laser cannons. But she needn't have. For by the time Lafier called Ekryua's name, the Bosroar's mobile laser cannon had already skewered the warhead with its ray. The matter-antimatter annihilation explosion boomed at close quarters. Starboard armor plating damaged. Breaches in compartments 4, 11, and 15, reported Jint. Oh, and in compartment 7 too. "Any casualties?" asked Lafier. "Everyone's fine at the moment." Jint monitored the statuses of each individual non-bridge personnel crew member, or in other words, all of the NCCs. Since they were now in combat, the NCCs should all be wearing their pressure suits. Lafier breathed a sigh of relief. "Hull temperature rising," said Samson. "But no need to worry on that account, either. It'll settle down in no time." The antiprotons once housed within the warhead were reacting with the atoms that made up the ship's hull. However, the majority of them had been deflected by their magnetic shield. "Is the Bosroar okay?" came Ados Raiwa's voice. Her hologram, around 10 dag in height, was floating above one end of the tactical control counter. It was only showing her upper half. "We can still push on," she told her transparent, miniature commander. "Good." The hologram vanished. The Hecto commander was both unit commander and the captain of her ship she was piloting for the fight. She hadn't the time to talk for very long. "Wave 2 incoming," said Ekryua. Once again, Lafier focused on her Frocross. From behind them, nuclear fusion shells launched by the patrol ships were drawing nearer. Suddenly, they were already zipping past the Bosroar in their bid to assail the mines. Lafier helped by taking down a mine before it separated into its multiple warheads, which served well to improve her mood. The sector surrounding the Aptic portal was now brimming with drifting shrapnel, and those glowing hot fragments, affected by Aptic 3's greater gravity, were forming long lines around the portal. Perhaps these rings of debris would become a bit of a famous sight for the planet. "Wave 3 incoming," said Ekryua. They were numbering these waves, but it didn't really mean much, seeing as the enemy mines were gushing out without pause. Their density was out of the ordinary, too. The mines they had had to deal with up until now were probably those that needed to weave between allied mines to reach them. Whereas the mines from this point forward would be hurtling their way with no obstruction to speak of. In other words, the fight would only get harsher from here on out. Lafier pulled the trigger. "How many mines did the enemy bring with them?" said Nelith, brow furrowed. "I wonder whether they thought they'd bring all of those for a fight with the main forces." Nife folded his arms. "Of course, even if they just planned to knock us down and stay to hold Aptic, they'd need mines left over for the job. Should we give the enemy a pointer or two?" "I'd be game to do so, if at all possible. Honestly, what is going through their heads?" The enemy's forces numbered an order of magnitude larger than their own. They'd had to steel themselves for an intense area control projectile blitz. Yet the sheer fury was exceeding their expectations by light years. Were they seriously aiming to pump the entirety of their stock of mines into the Aptic portal? Surely, they did understand that the Star Force's principal forces were approaching. Nelith couldn't wrap his head around it. "Well, whatever they're scheming, we still just need to hold out. Let's use the patrol ship's mines. Weren't we going to save them for the Yufthoth Battle of Pursuit, Nelith? If we lose here, there will be no Yufthoth, Nife. That is a startlingly cogent idea for you." "No, what's startling is how you're not raising some insane objection to the obviously correct move. We can't just stand here gaping in shock at each other. I hate to admit it, but that we can agree on. Tell all patrol ships to begin firing back with their own mines. By the way, what do we tell the assault ships? It'd pain me to keep exposing them to the enemy blitz like this. Can't be helped. If enemy assault ships start coming through, we'll need the help they can provide. But we need to do something. Have them band together with the defense ships. Huh. Let's pair each assault unit with a defense unit. We'll leave the formation particulars to the Glagam Iadbirer, subfleet command centers. A sound approach. I know it is. Now hurry, there's no time. Nife was about to stride off to relay his orders, but he froze in his tracks without delay. What? Nelith saw his twin's eyes were fixed on the tide of battle diagram. It seems we're a tad late, Nelith. Nelith turned to look at the diagram as well. The assault ships positioned around the portal had dropped drastically in number, such that significant gaps pockmarked the grid. It can't be. What in the starry skies is happening? It's their new weapon, reported communications staff officer, after consolidating all of the fleet information. New weapon? Nelith frowned. You find a new calling as a comedian? But the staff officer was not, in fact, practicing a joke routine. Innumerable shards of debris drifted in the Bosroar's vicinity. At this density, it was a strenuous feat just avoiding collision. And Leifir was expending her every effort weaving between all of the obstacles, large and small. At present, all she could do was pull the trigger whenever the bow happened to align with a target. Another shard, not far from rear starboard. Actually, it was too regular in shape to be called a shard, but naturally, that fact didn't cross Leifir's mind. Even if she were to have paid it any attention, she would have thought of it as another non-functioning warhead whose control unit or propulsion unit had been shot clean through. And now, the shard/non-functioning warhead had sprung back to life. Ekriua, 4-7. Leifir directed, quickly and loosely. The warhead that had been playing dead soared straight at them like an arrow. But the trigger finger of the silent deputy star pilot made it in time, albeit by a hair's breadth. The warhead blew up at close range, and a sudden storm of antimatter rained upon the Bosroar. The magnetic shield deflected half of the downpour, but couldn't fend off all of it. The Bosroar rocked viciously, and the artificial gravity failed to absorb the resulting tremors. "Fissures to the stern," Samson announced. But Leifir couldn't waste a second of concentration, not even on such a grave report, because that wasn't the only warhead awakening from hibernation. 3 others in the Bosroar's immediate area leapt from the grave at the same time and launched simultaneously toward their quarry. Leifir sharply pivoted course, and one of the warheads met its end against an antiproton torrent. Meanwhile, Ekriua's laser cannon spurted its rays and consigned one of the warheads to oblivion, then another. "She's an excellent gunner," thought Leifir. "The Sidrogar has fallen," shouted Sabash. The fellow assault ship that had been soaring to the Bosroar's port side now lay with its hull sliced in twain. The antimatter fuel must have leaked from the perforated section, as the Sidrogar had been rendered a swelling lump of plasma instantaneously. There was no surviving that. The face of Captain Vikar flashed through Leifir's mind. She bit her lip. In the end, he never even survived long enough to keep worrying what people thought of his skills. Yet she had no time to waste mourning or pitying him. The formerly sleeping warheads were still stirring to activity, one after the other. "Ekriua, shoot anything that looks like a warhead, even if it's not accelerating." "Yes," Ekriua nodded deeply. "But my hands are full with just the ones that are accelerating." "I see. So that's their new weapon," groaned Nelith. It was not particularly novel or revolutionary. If one searched through the catalog of weaponry from when the Star Forces battled exclusively in 3 space, they'd be almost sure to find a similar contraption. In short, after the mines got blown to fragments, they'd sleep for a fixed amount of time before resurrecting to fling themselves at nearby targets. But that was the only way they differed from normal mines. And they were largely pointless in planar space. There were multi-warhead mobile spacetime mines, but even if they played dead within the limited space of a spacetime bubble, they'd just be sitting ducks for enemy fire, so they posed no real advantage. However, when used in a large-scale 3-space battle, they proved a true nuisance. "What do we do, Nelith? How about some suggestions from you, Nife?" Even as he was trading choice words with his chief of staff of a twin, his brain was churning on all cylinders. "For the time being, let's withdraw the assault ships and push forward the defense ships. Then tell the defense ships to take care of any and all objects they deem suspicious." Don't have the assault ships withdraw too much. If and when the enemy ships arrive in force, it'll be a nightmare for the defense ship corps this time around. Got it. Yet another plan that's perfectly average. Your sweet praises are always a treat to hear. Another thing, can we consolidate the information accrued by all of our ships and uncover the records behind those enemy warheads? What do you mean? Nife frowned. We'll look into whether each of the post-division warheads have been blown down yet. Then we'll know that whichever ones haven't been blown down and aren't accelerating are in fact waiting in ambush. We can raise awareness against them. Can the flagship's CompuCrystals perform that level of operation? They'd end up processing vast amounts of data. It's at least worth trying, though. I'll confer with the officer in charge whether it's possible. Anything else? No. Please hurry. Okay. Nife ambled toward his subordinates, his long robe swishing in the air. Nelith took a deep breath. He was aware how irate he was. Enough with this game of forbearance. I feel like just taking the battle to planar space for a do-or-die showdown. But Nelith shook his head. There would be no do, only die. Nelith shuddered. Am I falling prey to the florid madness of the Biboth clan? Thanks to the defense ships taking the front lines, things had gotten much less desperate. Leifir was breathing hard. The boss roar had taken quite the beating. It was a miracle the propulsor engines and firearms were functioning without issue. And above all else, she thanked the stars there were no casualties among her crew. All ships are to retreat temporarily, said Ados Raiwa's voice. I received permission from Squadron Command. Unit Commander, you can't be serious, Leifir objected despite herself. My ship can still fight. Deca Commander Avriel. Ados Raiwa's holographic face made a sour expression. Please don't speak such twaddle. If you weren't in a condition to fight, you wouldn't be in a condition to retreat. And your ship must be as beat up as everyone else's. You need to withdraw for stopgap repairs. If your lust for battle isn't sated, don't worry. You will have to zip straight back to the field in no time at all. I understand. That's a relief. Anyone besides Deca Commander Avriel have any complaints? No, I take it. Now then, fall back at max battlefield acceleration. Route specifications will be sent. Leifir steered the bow away from the zone of war. When they were quite far removed, she noticed her right hand was shaking from the nervous tension. Try as she might, she could not quell the shaking through sheer willpower. Look at me. How pitiful. She lashed out in anger at her own weakness of mind. Half of her wanted to restrain her right hand using her left, but sadly, that hand was currently tucked inside the control gauntlet. She couldn't think of any other way, so she ended up biting on her right wrist. How's it taste? Embarrassed, Leifir looked up to find Jint's probing expression and the glass full of peach juice he was handing her. I thought you'd prefer it cold during times like these, so I prepared it chilled, but perhaps you're more in the mood for the blood of the living. What sort of creature do you think I am? She took the glass with her right hand, which had stopped trembling. I mean, I figure you hardly need to be inhuman to feel like sucking blood from time to time. Not that I've ever felt the urge. Well, I haven't, either. Gotcha. So you weren't blood-famished. No, I was not. Yeesh, with the shouting. Ever heard the saying, the lady doth protest too much? Captain, said Samson, rising to his feet. Forgive my rudeness, but may I receive your permission to have the NCCs take off their pressure suits? I believe we've left the danger zone for the time being, and working with those suits on is on the difficult side. Oh, it slipped my notice. You have my permission. Thank you kindly. But what rudeness was there to forgive? Oh, just that I interrupted that exchange. Look, to me you were having fun.